everyone, and welcome to the Pharmacy Edge panel discussion. I'm your host and moderator, Matt Hodgson, and today we have a room full of pharmacy business experts. Joining us today is Mike McGillivray, Max Beairsto, Marco Casagrande, and Matt Zubi. Today we're going to cover some pharmacy business topics that are relevant to many pharmacy business owners across Alberta and across Canada. We'll cover topics such as banner programs, government uncertainty and policy. We'll talk about staffing and recruitment. We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about some pharmacy finance and, of course, the future of the pharmacy industry. For the benefit of everyone tuning in, we'll start with a quick round of introductions. So, Mike, if you please introduce yourself and maybe your connection to pharmacy.
Sure, yeah, thanks, Matt. My name is Mike McGillivray. I've been in pharmacy independent financing. Our firm, CLG, does cash flow financing in a variety of different areas, but pharmacy is a big part of what we do. We're independent, so we're not part of a bank, and that gives us sort of a different perspective on pharmacy financing. But I've been working with pharmacists and healthcare professionals for, like I said, almost the last 20 years, working on any really capital needs, but in particular acquisition financing and any other large capital requirements they might have. So it's been a fun business to be in, and it's always an adventure and lots of interesting stuff to learn.
Absolutely, and always a good perspective to get how the lenders are looking at things.
Exactly.
Max, a bit about yourself.
Hello everybody, I'm Max Beairsto. I'm the president of EVCOR. We are a boutique M&A firm specializing in pharmacy valuations and the sale of pharmacies. We also help independent pharmacy owners grow their business and find opportunities for profitability within their business. And we're proud to say at EVCOR we're celebrating our 20th year in business. And before that I was a pharmacist owner. I worked for the Cates Group as the buyer for Western Canada for about 5 years. So in M&A for probably 25 years now.
Awesome, thanks. Marco?
Good day, I'm Marco Casagrande. I'm previously the owner of Sandstone Pharmacies based out of Alberta. Had a long career of owning pharmacies in that province. Recently, in the last few years, I've sold my pharmacies to a larger group, Neighbourly Pharmacy, and have stayed on both in the operations role and now in the business development role, working with owners across the country on the next phases of their life. And I've enjoyed the operating, ownership, and now the buying and selling of pharmacies. So it's been a great journey.
All right, thanks, Marco. Matt?
Thank you. My name is Matt. I'm a pharmacist and a pharmacy owner. I own 3 pharmacies with a few potential kind of on the horizon. I own and I operate a pharmacy, and I own a couple more where we're helping grow. And I've started my journey as a pharmacist about 10 years ago, and I've been doing my own pharmacy. I ventured on my own about 5-7 years ago, and it's been one of the best decisions I've made. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. First topic I want to get into is a little bit about the different banner programs. Now, of course, in Canada, there's a variety of different programs independent stores can participate in. But something folks might be often a little confused about is whether they want to participate in a banner program at all, and some have, the independence as a very strongly held feeling. But of course, there could be some costs and benefits of joining banner programs. Maybe I'll start with Max, and you can talk a little bit about, from your experience in the M&A side, the differences when you see a store that is participating in no banner program at all versus a store that actually is participating with a banner program.
No, that's a great question, Matt. So we have the good fortune of being able to see the financials of both the banner groups and the independents and all across Canada. And although there's some variability in terms of commercial terms and the amount of private label product is available between the banners, there is some variability, but the largest variability is with what the independents get in terms of commercial terms. We've seen very poor, and we've also seen those that outperform the commercial terms of the banners. But in those circumstances, that independent owner really has to work the generic reps to get those numbers. and it's a distraction from what they should be doing, is running their store. One of the other big things about independence versus joining a banner is the availability of private label. That is a huge margin opportunity for the front store if they're working it properly. So I think I'm not on the fence. I would probably side towards being in a banner versus going purely independent. And if you do choose to go independent, make sure that you're part of maybe a buying group. There's some small buying groups across the country, and I would do your research that way.
I'm really pro banner, to be honest, because I just, I look at it. I own stores that were in multiple banners, had the experience Mac's saying of owning and operating and seeing the differences and trying to tailor the needs of the banner against the needs of the stores. I just think that the stores generally operate better when they have some of that banner structure wrapped around them. I think they get some advantages. I think a lot of owners don't take full advantage of what the banners can provide. And each of the banners has their own niche, and they're trying to figure out what they're going to be great at and what they're going to offer the pharmacists. But generally, if I look at the operations of a pure independent, whether it's the financial aspect of what they're gaining, to your point, it's a bit more of a chase. And then you just get to what does the general store look like, the condition, the operating standards. I just think by far and away the banners give those stores a better chance.
Right. I think there's just an aspect of what people prefer too, right? So we think of it as a numbers game or a dollars and cents thing, but if you look at the pool of pharmacists, there's only, I don't know, would be 10% of them or something want to be owners. The rest want to be employees. Of the 10%, and they probably want to be owners for reasons not just financial, but they prefer the idea of owning their own store. But I think that the idea of negotiating your own terms and being not bound and being even sort of more independent is almost a preference thing for people, right? There's even a smaller subset of the ownership group that just wants to do it. They like, when I talk to our clients who are totally independent, even outside of a buying group, I get the feeling that they're not actually doing it financially. They just like it.
Yeah.
There's
an art to be
independent.
Independent.
Part of owning a business is negotiating. Why
Exactly.
would I want to have somebody doing that on my behalf? So I think it's just a mindset thing for a lot of people. And if you presented them and said, look, this is costing you a couple of bucks, they might be like, yeah, but it's the most entertaining part of my deal is negotiating the generic. And so I think that there's, I think that, I've identified that as much as anything. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can really see it when somebody's enjoying it. It shows in the financials.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they brag about it.
Oh yeah.
I'm independent. I do my own deals.
I think it's okay to challenge the banners. Like that's my take on it. Is I think you choose one, and we can talk about what that means once you choose one. But essentially, once you've chosen one, I think it's your responsibility to challenge the banner to be the best banner for you. And you've got to embrace the pieces they give you. But then you also have to give feedback to that banner and challenge them to be better, and provide you all of those tools to help you grow. You've chosen them as a partner.
I guess one of the biggest things with the banner is choosing which banner you're going to go with. I feel like almost each or every store will work best with a different type of banner, right? So, and the owner too, right? So there are some owners that would work really well, say, with specific banners that take a good chunk of the hassle off of the pharmacist's hands or the owner if they are a pharmacist. On the other hand, if the owner is not a pharmacist and they're overlooking the operations, then they're looking at a different set of services from the banner, right? Mm-hmm. or help. Yeah. So I think, and each store, as Max said, like the private label, would it sell better at this store than this store? Is it worth it, right? Generic and kind of terms, are they better with this banner or this banner, depending on the volume too, right? So I think if it's each store is different. Yeah,
and to Marco's point there, I think you kind of springboarded off of what you said initially. It really depends on the type of store, because if you've got a lot of front store, you're going to need a banner that has planogram support.
Exactly.
And those can really drive profit and shield margin, especially if you're treating your end caps properly within the planogram system.
LTOs, right? Limited time offers. We see that quite often because a store operator will not and does not even know how to run LTOs, limited time offers. So if I say the private label, you buy 2 but get 1 free, or and putting those stickers, designing the stickers, getting them done, and I've seen it in one of my stores where people come in and they see the same product. They come in every day, but once you start putting kind of sale or special offer or so on, you see a huge uptake on the same products that people were seeing, but now it's just kind of, yeah. So
How much time did you put into banner selection? How much time do you contemplate it? And do you think pharmacist operators are not putting enough time? I mean, people think location is probably the primary factor, but I think banner's up there, and I'm not sure if everybody puts as much time into that selection, that vetting process as they ought to.
it's, yeah, so yeah, you're right. It's the banner selection again. When, yeah, as the stores come in, it depends on what your plan for that store is, right? If it's 1,000 square foot pharmacy, medical, in a medical building right next to a doctor's office, then you're not looking for much support in the front store, right? Whereas if it's 5,000-6,000 square foot pharmacy in a small town that doesn't have any other grocery or retail stores, then it's a completely different banner that you're looking for, right? You may kind of compromise on some of the terms, but you will be getting some support for the front store, for the kind of selection of the products, the SKUs, what you carry, and so on. Right. So I think it's just kind of figuring out what's best for each location, I guess, and each owner too, right? So,
Marco, you'd mentioned owners might not be taking advantage of all the other support that banner programs provide. It's focused largely here on the monetary side with commercial terms and other support. But what do you mean by other types of support that might be afforded from the banners?
Well, I think owners get fixated on what's the generic rate. Ultimately, what's gonna come back to me in generic rate, and as the banners evolve, they're moving some of that generic money around into different buckets of support. I mean, I have a phrase which is, there's only one pocket of money, right? There's only one pool they can pull from. So ultimately, the same pool exists there. And then the question is, what are they deploying the resources towards? So is it front store programs? Is it pricing programs for your retail? Is it clinical service support to be able to help you make the transition away from a pure prescription business? Is it physician support? Is it marketing? There's so many other aspects to these banners that are just lost on the average owner, because I think they're so fixated on what does it take for me to put money in the bank.
Right. And when it comes to ultimately the value that get placed on these pharmacies, whether from a lending perspective, valuation for planning or M&A purposes, that rate you have is ultimately going to have a fairly substantial impact on the ultimate value of the pharmacy. So how should owners maybe approach negotiating when their banner agreement comes up for renewal? There can be, I'm sure, a sense of brand loyalty to a certain point, but from your guys' experience, I'm just curious, is it worth making sure you're reaching out to multiple banners, have that discussion, find out how they're going to support you? Do you see? Well,
the decision is really the first decision, because once you're in with a banner, it frankly gets a little harder to get out, right? Those are the facts of the way the banner agreements are structured, yes. Right? And one of the trends that I've seen recently is just the way that the banner agreements are being auto-renewed without the owner understanding that they've kind of signed on to an agreement that's just going to auto-renew for them.
I think that's my number one pet peeve, Marco, is the evergreen clause that are in, as far as I know, every banner. Yeah. So an evergreen clause, of course, is it sneaks up on you. Yeah. You have to say, no, I'm not in, as opposed to, yeah, I'll renew. Yeah. It automatically renews. But there's an excellent opportunity to, when you renew, get the evergreen clause removed so you hold the power, but also just circle the calendar. Have some method of preparing for that day that you have to tell them, no, I'm not renewing. I want to see your best deal. And at that point, you can vet other banners and hold somebody's feet to the fire. Yeah. You got to arm yourself with some knowledge and not just have that banner roll over with a renewal.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, as I said to owners, next to your relationship with the community, it might be the most important relationship you have in the life of your pharmacy, is that relationship with the banner you choose. Choose it wisely, but then embrace it. Once you've chosen it, understand that you may be in this banner. I meet a lot of owners who are 25, 30, 35 years in these banners and are thrilled about it. Banners are not a bad word, they're a good word, but choose wisely. Make sure, to Matt's point, pick the banner that suits your store.
Is that your favorite word, or is it tariff?
From a lending perspective, it's largely agnostic to banners, even independents. Independents are a little harder to calculate cash flow, just because you have to dig into where all of the professional allowance or rebates are going.
Right.
But otherwise, it's pretty straightforward from a financing perspective.
All right, awesome. Well, that was a good discussion about banner programs. I'd like to move on to talk about another issue that's facing a lot of owners, especially those that are in certain provinces right now, when it comes to government policy and some regulatory uncertainty. One of course, the buzzwords is Canadian Pharmacare and what that might look like. That's getting rolled out in a few provinces, maybe soon to come in others. We're seeing a few different perspectives on this. Max, from your perspective, of course, working with stores in different provinces, maybe start with just this concept of pharmacare and what that might look like. Are you seeing is it good news, bad news? Are people just upset, excited? What's kind of the verdict out there?
Yeah, I think pharmacare, the concept is good, but I truly believe that there's going to be some unintended consequences to pharmacare. We've seen the provincial, the acronym is escaping me. The
Pan-Canadian.
The Pan-Canadian initiatives. And, that forced generic pricing down. Pharmacare is going to have the same kind of effect, even though they're not directly negotiating. But with that, we will see more focus on there'll be a single provider, and possibly see an increase in drug shortages. That's my concern about it. Now, from a Manitoba perspective, who have recently embraced the Canadian Pharmacare system, we've seen both opinions. Buyers are seeing this as a problem, but sellers are seeing it as an opportunity. No, we're going to grow our business because it provides more access. So there's a little bit of tug of war between buyers and sellers in that particular province, and I think we'll probably see that as it gets rolled out, if it gets rolled out. Probably Alberta will not embrace it.
We will not embrace it, I'm sure, but
Yeah.
I think we'll be the last to embrace it. That's why, it doesn't affect me, right? It's probably for on a national level. I'm pretty sure it's going to have its effect. But on Alberta, even with my colleagues, we barely discuss it, to be honest. So yeah.
Well, I mean, Max said it. The intention's right, to bring access, to Canadians and get prescription medications in their hands where they need it. That's the intention. My take is, I think this could be accomplished within the means of what we have, right? I mean, I think pharmacy owners know that the private payers right now generally have a more flexible remuneration process to way prescriptions are billed. The provincial plans tend to be more rigid, but the minute we go to a pharmacare plan, I think it's going to become ultra rigid. It's going to bring access, but it's going to reduce fees. It's going to reduce the ability for pharmacy to provide what they want to provide. And I think that if we just worked within the framework we've got right now with public and private paying, and just work to make that model more accessible to Canadians, I think we would get to where we want to get to.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. I think it is truly redundant. I think the provinces, from what I've seen from a business perspective, are doing a good job in providing to those in need. And I see this as just another bureaucracy within the federal government that has the potential to get bloated. Managing a a drug program, a third-party program, is no menial task.
Right.
It's going to be, I think it's good. Yeah, same thing. I think it's, just as you said, redundant is the word. You're doing the same work over and over. From like a daily practice perspective, even like a patient perspective, most patients across the country, I feel like, they have some sort of drug plan, right? And there are so many questions that will pop up, like as we were speaking, kind of so many questions that pop up. They cannot cover every single medication that's approved in Canada, right? So now, are these medications going to be just sit on the shelf and nobody's going to buy them until, except for cash-paying patients, or is that going to be for certain people, right? There are so many things that are going to be. I think it will have even an impact on the health, not just the business, but on the healthcare system. You cannot. I don't think you can standardize medications. It is done in other countries, but I think it's going to be a lot of trial and error. And I think there's going to be a fair bit of the error part of it until we get to the formula that works, I guess. So yeah.
Well, and zooming out a bit, I mean, especially in Alberta, we're dealing with maybe more policy uncertainty when it comes to the main public payer. Every province is a bit beholden to a huge clientele patient base that's going to be on those programs. And I mean, really, no one's winning in the world of uncertainty. I'm curious, from the lending perspective, I assume you guys have to keep a pretty, close lens on, is there a change coming down, the pipeline? Is it going to affect, remuneration for the pharmacies? Does that uncertainty, I mean, are you seeing it in what pharmacies you're able to lend? Or how are you integrating some of this uncertainty with funding when it comes to the lending?
Yeah, Mike.
I would call it, if you want to call it regulatory risk broadly. We could call it funding risk.
Yeah.
I think it's true. I think where you can provide access, you can also provide restriction. There's sort of two sides of the same coin, and so that's something we contemplate. But as a lender, it's something that's been part of the risk all along. I think that, I certainly the last 15 years have represented a lot of sort of regulatory uncertainty, just in the structure of the business.
Yeah.
I think where it becomes riskier is if the market doesn't appear to reflect the increased risk. In other words, if there's increased risk and uncertainty, in theory at least, the valuation should come down in lockstep with sort of lending appetite. If there's a disconnect there or a gap there, then that creates a different sort of set of financing problems for somebody who's looking to buy a pharmacy. But I would say it's somewhat more of the same. There's other areas of regulatory risk, services, professional services, other areas that are at risk.
You're right. So there's a lot of, when you start looking at pharmacies and trying to value them today, and you start to, National Pharmacare always takes the headlines, but if you start looking at preferred provider networks, like if you're in a community where you've got, maybe a union environment and you've got a PPN that's operating, like that can be just completely devastating to your business, but impossible to almost value. Right? You look at the clinical service modeling, whether it's scaling up in some provinces, or now we're starting to see some provinces scaling down. How do you measure that into the valuation of a business? How do you look at like closed provider networks on specialty, as an example, where you can't, the move towards specialty high cost drugs right now is rampant. It's the biggest growth in the industry, but you can't figure out right now when you look at a store, how much is that impacting their overall growth? So like, there's so much more to this in the lending side, I imagine. I'm not the guy with the money, right? But if you look at it objectively and try to figure out what a store is worth, it's very challenging to kind of piecemeal all these government regulatory pieces into it.
Well, there is another, you almost touched on the concentration risk of having a union town, okay? And it goes beyond just the PPN. It's like, look at what's happening with the auto industry in Ontario. But we have that problem in Alberta too. We have little towns that are so dependent on oil and gas. We have mining towns, coal.
Yeah.
That's the best thing since sliced bread, and then it falls out of favor. and those towns really suffer up and down. Even without a PPN, even if they're not unionized, the concentration risk involved with having a town or a community so dependent on one industry is a huge concentration risk, and I'm sure that the fellow to my right here would attest. I just noticed something. Matt, the producer of this video podcast, Darcy Cameron, did she just choose men with the first name that starts with an M? Was that a criteria? I hear her chuckling off camera.
Yes.
Sure.
So it makes it easier. It makes it easier. So it's simpler for her.
Oh,
Simpler.
okay, gotcha. Okay. Anyway, sorry, didn't mean to, but
Yeah, to answer your question, it is. It's a factor. I don't know if it's the biggest concern risk-wise in the industry right now from a lending perspective, and I think lenders really should be in some way, the canary in the coal mine in terms of risk. Sometimes the market appetite can lag what the actual risk should be perceived in an acquisition, for instance, and so. Or do we provide sort of a sober second view of things? Sure, but and the regulatory risk is there. I don't know if as a lender we perceive it as more than it has been in the past.
Right. Matt, from your perspective, obviously running many stores right now, how do you work within that world of uncertainty where you might find out in 6 months, oh, the services I provide just got cut down by a bunch. Talk, whispers of, is the dispensing fee going to be touched? How much does it, keep, you sleeping, keep you up at night, I should say? How do you navigate that?
It definitely affects us, right? So there has been recently changes in terms of the compensation in Alberta, right? Specifically, that's where we're operating. And it affected a couple stores where the revenue changes. Luckily, we've set up a model where from the beginning we tried not to be fully dependent on services. You try to kind of expand your patient base, and you try to take basically to optimize your operations in a way where you're maximizing your gains from what's being offered right now, but also try as much as possible to be aware when the contract is going to expire, right, with the government, and what it might look like. What's the government doing right now? You can basically, by looking at previous discussions with doctors, for instance, we saw that they went to the doctors and they did not treat them well. They didn't treat the nurses well, right? So that's what I felt like is we're probably going to be next there. So, you try to kind of, as much as possible, you optimize for now, but you plan for the worst, I guess, and look at other options in terms of, for instance, what we've done. We've added a few services that we could provide, stuff like travel vaccines and travel consults, stuff that are not dependent as much on the government programs, that are more dependent on getting the patients in for services that they appreciate, either willing to pay for or that will generate a separate stream of income, right? So that's kind of how we try to kind of
No, absolutely. As we wrap up this topic, I think it's safe to say uncertainty, not good for both operational, for finance, for the value of your business at the end of the day. All right, I want to shift now and talk about pharmacist staffing, coverage, recruitment. This is a big topic. Pharmacists aren't just growing on trees, and we're seeing, if somebody in terms of succession planning, they want to sell their business, unless a pharmacist is in place, we've got obviously folks that want to retire and there's no one to come in and run that store kind of in their place. This has a lot of kind of spin-off effects and ramifications. Even Mike, I'll start with you. You joined us at a previous Pharmacy Edge event kind of talking about the challenges right now, especially kind of urban versus rural, and some direct impact on what you're willing to lend based on if a store has long-term pharmacist coverage. What are you seeing kind of right now, and is this problem getting any better?
Hard to say if it's getting better. I think that there's some some structural aspect. I mean, just the labor market, I think, in terms of pharmacists has to shift. So that's maybe a policy and macros perspective that's above where I'm sitting.
Sure.
But in terms of risks, I'd have to think it's the biggest one as a lender that we perceive now is the ability to staff a store. Marco, you probably have we all probably have a lot of insight into the difficulties there, and that just translates straight into risk.
Right.
It's an unequally distributed risk geographically, as you say. So the further afield a store is from a large urban center, the harder it is to get somebody to go there, and you know, obviously it's going to be harder to staff. So that's not just a staffing thing. That's can the store be sold if you want to sell it? If as a lender there's some catastrophic reason we have to take over and manage something that we've lent to, how do we staff that? And so all of these things that used to be relatively smooth processes are now no longer have obvious solutions, and it's created, I think, some disruption in the industry, and certainly created how we perceive the risk of it. So.
Right.
Yeah, you know, this is a huge topic, and I'm just going to fire off a couple of thoughts about it. You know, a few years ago, I looked at class sizes across the universities in Canada, and I note that it was only BC that increased their class size. Now, I understand there's another university opening in Ottawa. It'll be a French university or French program, but that's not going to alleviate anything outside of Quebec. But that's also 5 years from now that it helps, you know, staffing issues within that province. And it's painfully obvious that the university have fallen short in terms of meeting the demand of Canada. You know, the population is growing, and yet the class sizes aren't. So the stopgap was to bring in internationally trained pharmacists, which, depending on what statistic you believe, between 37 and 40% of the pharmacists are internationally trained. And in rural Canada, from a cultural perspective, it doesn't lend to an ideal setting for the internationally trained pharmacist to live and thrive. So that further exacerbates the problem, I think. One of the other things that I've observed over the last 20 years, I guess, is at one point we had too many pharmacists. And that resulted in lower wages and a lot of staff pharmacists leaving and opening their own stores. Now I believe we have too many stores. We see it over and over. Stores that are filling, you know, 10,000, 8,000 prescriptions a year. They just have a job, and they're not making as much as they would working for somebody else. I think pharmacy owners need to embrace the concept of buying a file. And I think with those pharmacists that have an underperforming store, understanding that they do have value, it's just not as a buy and run. Mm-hmm. I think that's my main points on that. One last point. Just rural versus urban, we have seen the wages of rural pharmacists go up immensely, and that has lowered valuations, and we looked at all of the valuations and sales we did over 2024, and the encouraging part of this is that despite gross margin percentages going down, gross margin dollars are up almost across the board. But only 70% of those stores we studied actually had an increase in profitability. Okay? Those that didn't were primarily rural stores where the biggest impact was from wages, wage creep.
Yeah. If I'm a young pharmacist today, I say to them, I've spent a lot of time at the university events, and I've had a good chance to talk to young grads, and they are, lifestyles have changed. People don't necessarily want to move to rural the way they used to in my era or other eras, right? And but I encourage them to go to rural. I think that's where the opportunity is. That's where your opportunity to become an owner is. It's a faster pathway if you want to become an independent owner. Certainly economically, if you want to start there in your career, you're going to do better, just on pure wage and benefits. So
Cost of living,
it's the place. It is the place to be if you have that ability to go to a rural market. But I think generally, employers right now just aren't creative enough in the way they hire people. That's where I see the pitfall. I think that it's to Max's point. Everybody is sort of trying to lean on a wage, and certainly that's a big piece of what the economics are for a pharmacist. But I think there's so much more to it, whether it's housing or housing allowance or ability to integrate their family into the community they're in and have that be a more successful piece, or maybe it is an ownership ability within their store. If you're an independent owner, maybe you can find a way to give them a piece of that ownership.
Or provide a snowmobile for her an ATV or something.
I've had the luxury of being in some very remote parts of this country, and it is tough. It's tough in those markets. Like, you do sometimes wonder, hey, this is tough up here. This is not good weather. Why am I here? But I think the opportunity is because the people who love those communities love being in those communities, and they tend to thrive.
I actually, pretty funny, like we got to the rural communities, and that's basically, as soon as I graduated, I finished my training at Rexall in downtown Vancouver, right? And I was offered, back to your point, I was offered either like a float pharmacist, relief pharmacist in Vancouver, or a pharmacy manager right away in Crowsnest Pass. So that's where I started. I picked the manager's position, and that's where I learned a lot. I learned the most. It was a sacrifice. My wife hated it, but eventually, we learned a lot, and then we grew from that. Right? There's a lot to learn. Eventually, we're now still go for visits and stuff, but it was definitely an initial yeah.
Say no more. You're hired. It's good. It's good.
But
you're hired. You start Tuesday.
It's a good part of, you learn how to deal with the clientele, different type of patients. It's honestly, it's a completely different type, but it gave me a set of skills that I still use until today, right? So it's huge. I think it played a huge role, absolutely.
How do you find owning multiple stores right now? How is that retention piece? Have you built long-term relationships with your employees? Is it tough to recruit or find new ones if there's some turnover?
To be honest, our retention, whether with pharmacists or staff, it's pretty good actually. We usually aim for also a partnership in the store, like an operating partner. That way we're the pharmacist is pretty invested, and they're going the extra mile for that store. You can always give them the hand of showing them how to operate the store, how to improve it, how to improve the business, and so on. From the mistakes that we've done, right? It's nothing. It's not like, from the experiences that we've had, and then even for staff pharmacists, we try as much as possible to treat our employees to the best of our abilities, right? They're the fighters on the ground. They're in the battleground every single day, and they're the people that are technically putting food on the table, right? For them, whether for themselves or for us. If you get a good pharmacist and they're treating the patients well, that patient is coming back and they're telling their friends and family, and they're moving. And we've had that multiple times, right? So we try to basically reward that behavior, being nice. And then they start growing, and there's always an opportunity to grow, to partner, to all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
That partnership piece, we seem to be seeing that maybe a little bit more. I'm not sure from the lending perspective, does that help de-risk it if you've got the person who's going to be running the store as a part owner versus somebody who might just be on a contract for a few years?
Yeah, absolutely. So as a lender, we would perceive it probably the same way an owner would, right? I guess de-risking is the best way to put it, but it's not just de-risking, but it's also improving the top line, right? And by having that owner-operator there, taking that extra step that comes with a feeling of ownership. So, yeah, from a lending perspective, it's the best model that we would see. A remote owner operator, a remote owner non-operator also works, but it takes more experience and knowledge about how to do that. And frankly, it's more capital behind you to be able to sustain somebody leaving, or be able to pay for relief, et cetera, if you need to. Right.
You mentioned some of the creative options that folks should look at. Is that partnership model kind of a piece of that, or?
Yeah, it is, and I, certainly on the acquisition side, that is, to Mike's point, it's a big factor. Like if you've got an heir apparent and your store ready to step in, and that person wants to buy an equity stake in a store with you, I think that's a really good place to start. I would say, and there's probably a whole secondary discussion to be had about if you're in the process in your own store of trying to, carve out an ownership stake for your business partner or your pharmacist, how to structure that. Because that's another piece of this, is that, over the years I see a lot of, scenarios where, an owner, for the right reasons, has tried to bring their junior pharmacist in, but hasn't really structured it correctly, and ultimately it leads to some kind of unrest or maybe ultimate disaster, either pre-transaction or during a transaction. So, I think there's a lot of things to be learned, and I think there's a lot of advice you need to get about how to best structure that so you protect yourself as the owner.
I parrot exactly what you're saying. It is a good model, but it really has to be papered correctly. Right. And there's many ways of doing it. There's profit sharing where there's no ownership. Right. There's concept of phantom shares. I think there's somebody coming on podcast to talk about that in the future. But critically, that ownership piece needs to be papered well with a really solid USA, so that partner doesn't hold that deal hostage.
Correct. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, USA referring to a shareholder agreement between the owners.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Just a comment about the rural side. I think one thing that's a concern, and Matt, I know that this wouldn't be far from your thought, but just patient access, and access to the service of a pharmacist is pretty critical for outcomes in general. And I think the data out of Ontario is probably as good as anywhere about just the decline in access is as a result of these costs. So it's not just a business thing and a dollars and cents thing. It's it's sitting outside of the patient contact like we might. I don't want to forget that, because I would hate to see a decline in outcomes in rural Canada versus urban Canada simply because of pharmacist access, with pharmacists being such a critical point of care. So I don't know if there's a policy. Again, the policy solutions are above my pay grade here, but I think I think we'll start to see that, and it would be a real shame if those health outcomes were affected like that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, now moving on to another topic, I want to touch on kind of maybe the state of the finances within the independent pharmacy world. Many of us at the table here on a daily basis see some of the internal reporting that independent pharmacies have. We've talked on different Pharmacy Edge platforms before. There does seem to be maybe a degradation of the quality of some of this data, is a nice way to put it. I'm curious, Max, you see this obviously a lot in your day-to-day. Is that maybe just a perception issue, or what should pharmacists and these pharmacy owners be doing to make sure they have proper accounting and bookkeeping practices?
Well, you might have trouble shutting me up about this topic. We do see a lot of financial statements, and I would anecdotally say that it is degrading. I want to collect some empiric evidence to suggest this. So for 2024, we did a study of all the valuations and analysis that we did, and there was, we picked on 3 balance sheet accounts: accounts receivable, accounts payable, and inventory. Those all speak to the income statement, and if they're done correctly, you have a level of assurance that the margin reported on the financial statement is accurate. So what we did is we looked back at all of the evaluations and determined, okay, did they do their AP, their accounts payable correctly? Did they do their accounts receivable correctly? Did they count their inventory? Did they do a physical count or have some sort of perpetual system to monitor inventory? We found that 80% of the financial statements that we reviewed had at least one error. Therefore, the margin stated on the financial statement was incorrect. Now, anecdotally, I would say it is getting worse. And despite all of the technology available to bookkeeping and accountants, it's sloppiness. I think it's just pure sloppiness. Part of it, though, is just not understanding how pharmacies work. There's a lot of
It's a complicated business.
it's complicated.
Complicated, yeah.
The accounts payable, or sorry, the accounts receivable is multifaceted. We've got third-party payers. You got the patients with accounts. A lot of accounts forget to put in the generic rebates. Like that can be accrued to the accounts receivable. Accounts payable, if you've got a McKesson account, which most pharmacies do across Canada, or a lot of pharmacies across Canada have, those statements are very difficult to unfurl because there's future dating. A lot of accountants don't take the time to do that. If they do, you have more assurance that the margin reported on the financial statement is accurate. So, to sum up, I think it is degrading.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and there's two pieces to this. So there's if you don't have proper accounting, bookkeeping practices, you're kind of flying blind as to how your business is actually performing. So there's a whole operational component to it. But then, of course, as folks want to, they're going to transition, they're going to get out of ownership, they want to sell. That poses an entirely different set of challenges. Marco, maybe just operationally, how critical it is to ensure you have basically the right info to actually make changes and adapt.
Well, and I'm going to slightly disagree with Max because I don't know that it has eroded as much as I think the industry's got more complicated, and I don't think people have moved with the times. Like I just don't think they have enough quality, whether it's bookkeeping or maybe even like Max says, their accountants understand it well enough. So whether that's leading to degradation of it, I don't know. But I would just say, like, firstly, you need to partner yourself with the right accounting team that's going to be able to understand how this industry works. And Max said it best, like it's a complicated business that people, when you try to describe this to an average business owner, how the government impacts it, the banners impact it, the pharmaceutical industry impacts it, like the average pizza owner, pizza joint owner is like, what? And so, but you have to, once you get somebody who actually understands that, and there are people around in this industry who are really good at that, and when they do that, naturally the quality of your books are going to come up, but a lot of it ultimately starts with how much work are you doing at the source report level? And I think when you start to look at it on a valuation level, a lot of what I spend time is looking at back to the source reports. What is your RX system showing? What's the margin? What's the point of sale system showing? What's the margin? What is your actual labor, modeling? What is your actual rent structure? Like when you get to those things, you can put together a financial statement pretty quickly for them. Whether that's your notice to reader level, that's not for me to judge.
Right.
All right. Well,
And just before you go, how dare you disagree with me? Do you want to take this outside, Marco?
I was going to tackle you.
Yeah, I know. I was going to come across this table.
Well,
I don't know. You've been working out though, so.
There's a couple of different. Well, there's a few different accounting issues, right? There's the accounting for the clarity of operating your own business. There's the accounting making sure that your business looks good to sell.
Right.
And then what's the accounting you're looking at from an acquisition perspective? How
Right.
good is the accounting of the store you're looking at? So there's sloppiness at all levels of that we see. Obviously, I would also say, as we're looking at the acquisition side most of the time, but and annual reviews on our existing clients, but which is almost always great. But on the acquisition side, it's not always sloppiness. There's
Malfeasance?
I would say, yeah. I think that there's, yeah. I think that. I don't think you need to take a cynical approach always, but certainly when we're looking at risk, it's more than I would like, and probably more now than ever. Where I can't say in good honesty that this is sloppiness,
Yeah.
right? And so you don't want to take the approach that that's always the case, but it's
hanging there somewhere.
more than I would like. I'm looking at something and saying I can't. This
And even in those cases, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
No,
like
but-
it would be like a CPA signing off on like a sort of a balance sheet and submitting the taxes, but you think it's basically funny business, not a mistake basically, and not
Yeah.
overlooking the numbers, but it's intentionally.
that happens.
How are we doing for time, Matt?
We've got a few minutes.
Can I tell a story
yes.
here?
I'd love to.
So on your topic, it's like where it's intentional. Our lead analyst was doing a review of a store. It was in Ontario, and he was so excited. It's like, look at the margin. It's the same every year. They must be doing something correct. I was like, okay, well, look at the inventory. It's jumping around like crazy. So we inquired with the accountant. He says, oh, yeah. No, I adjust the inventory so that the margin is consistent year over year.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You go in and remove the inventory? No, just,
Congratulations.
yeah. You're committing fraud. Yeah.
Sometimes the not sloppy version is intentional, and sometimes it's not, or sometimes it's not intended to be, deliberately deceitful,
Yeah.
and sometimes it is. And so, I think there's more pressure on the business, and people want to maximize what they're getting in a sale. The little red flags that you're talking about really do need to be investigated.
So somebody mentioned the cynical word. I'm definitely cynical.
Come by it honestly.
I believe the financial statement that I get is wrong.
Right.
That's our starting point.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely a challenge out there, and I think folks need to maybe change their tune a little bit when it comes to using your accounting line on the financial statements as a place to save a few dollars. At the end of the day, it's not going to be one of your biggest expenses, and having that consistency is going to pay off, especially over the long term. I think is a
Like back to your point, it's my bookkeeper for the last 6-7 years. She's retiring. She gave us the notice, so we were trying to find somebody. We found somebody, but part of that, it's one of the toughest things is, okay, as we're starting to kind of move things over, okay, you haven't asked me for this, you haven't asked me for that. That bookkeeper used to give me like heck for a receipt, just if I went at, like for a lunch receipt, that's business related. If she cannot see it, she tells me, I don't know what the GST on it is, right? So there could be, basically you could be missing out on certain things. You could be, basically, and it's in this case, it's really hard to replace someone who kind of cared, who was so diligent with it, and that basically, you need to kind of, it's way more important than a lot of people kind of perceive it as or assume,
It's not a simple task. The general ledger is thousands and thousands of entries, which get boiled down and summarized in that financial statement. So garbage in, garbage out.
Absolutely, yeah. It's this bookkeeper, I remember when she's never done pharmacies when we first started. And that first time when we kind of got things over, she was calling McKesson almost every day to get to the right departments, to figure out how to get, as you said, accounts payable, GST statements, right? And all these guys and how to enter them. Some pharmacies will have, with the banner agreements, say what they call, I think McKesson called it prebate, which is like an interest-free loan over the next 5 years. Is that included? How is it being recorded? And how is it being done? So a lot of stuff has to be, like, it could be very easily missed. And it was eye-opening. She was the first person that we started our bookkeeping with, but it was eye-opening once we started interviewing people and basically how many of the people that have applied, they either don't know or don't care enough to actually go and dig for that piece of information and try to kind of clarify it as much as possible, right? So,
it's critical to have a subject matter expert, somebody who understands pharmacy that can help advise you on that side. Because as you just attested, I mean, this is not a super simple industry, especially on the finance side. As we do get closer to wrapping up here, I want to maybe change gears a little bit and get each of you to put on your prognosticator caps, if you will. Obviously, pharmacy, I mean, you mentioned, hey, it's changed a lot over the last 10, 15 years. As we look forward now, I want each of you maybe just to weigh in on what are you looking at in terms of trends, excited about or worried about, just as we say maybe over the next few years, from each of your perspectives. And maybe Marco, will start with you. You've got obviously a more national perspective, but over the next few years, what's got you, excited, worried, concerned?
Well, the obvious answer is the staffing, right? I mean, the staff, you need the best staff. Like if I was starting a pharmacy today, it would kind of go in this order. It would be, choose your partners correctly. We've talked about that. Find the right banner, find the right supplier, find the right landlord. These are your partners in the business that are critical to your success. But right behind that is you need the very best staff you can have, and you need to treat them in the way that they need to be treated. I'm not a pharmacist, but every pharmacist I talk to across the country right now does not always love being a pharmacist. So they want to be in an environment where they feel loved and they want to be a part of it, and they are desperately looking for those environments to come to. And if you supply that, they will stay with you and they want to be a part of it, right? Then from there it becomes, what do you do within the operation of your business, right? So whether it is accounting or the backbone pieces of it to operate it, including technology, right? Because I see that as maybe the biggest trend coming right now is on the technology side. Embracing automation, embracing what your pharmacy management systems can do, sideline platforms that might help you on clinical services and other. That's where the opportunity sits for you right now.
Right.
Thanks, Marco. You took all my talking points. It's like
We'll give Max a minute to think. Matt, from your perspective, over the next few years, things that have you maybe excited or what you have your eye on?
So to be honest, it's a combination, right? As you said, probably uncertainty with the government regulations is a huge one. It's probably the biggest, to be honest. And that doesn't help kind of whether it's for planning, whether it's for even keeping the good staff, right? So like over COVID, we lost, not us as a group, but no, like pharmacists, a lot of pharmacists basically, they just either retired or completely changed careers, right? So I think it's mostly dealing with the government and the uncertainty that kind of comes with it. The part that I'm probably most excited about is the amount of pharmacists that are kind of considering ownership, the amount of pharmacists that are kind of thinking about that as a potential kind of next move, right, for them. It's huge, and it's been like it's a great move in every aspect. I always say I've always loved being a pharmacist. Once you go to the pharmacy and have somebody come back and say, "Oh, thank you for doing such and such. My husband is feeling so much better." That is worth so much more than any financial gain that could happen, right? It's or going home and feeling that you've affected somebody's life in a positive way. In my opinion, that's kind of why I personally still wanna go to the pharmacy every day. When people call and looking for, say, "Where's Matt? I want to talk to him about something," and they come back to you with good news and talk about it. That's the best part, and basically that kind of seeing kind of a lot of younger and a lot of pharmacists in general actually looking at ownership as a subject or as an opportunity or next move. It's something pretty exciting. I think it helps the industry a lot. It helps the level of care we give a lot.
Absolutely, no, that's a great perspective. Mike, maybe from the lender perspective, over the next few years, what's something you might be paying more attention to?
Sure. Yeah, I think it maybe an issue that even sits above that. It's relevant as a lender, but our clients are independent pharmacists, right? I'm a big proponent of independent pharmacy. I fill all the prescriptions for our family at an independent pharmacy, and I think even observing the United States having very corporatized their pharmacy industry, I think that there's people who I would disagree with that think that trend, one, is being successful. I think it's actually unwinding a little bit there. and two, that's that appropriate path for Canada and an inevitable path for Canada. And I don't think that that's the case. I think pharmacy at its core, going back to the history of pharmacy, is about an individual and an independent working with a patient, and it's not just about large corporates or even large independent corporates necessarily providing that service. And I think that it's between two individuals. And I would be interested to see the trend over the next while to see if Canada reverses course in some ways and independent pharmacy continues to be more prominent, not less prominent. I'd love to see that trend.
Right, absolutely. Max, what you got your eye on?
Yeah, I just want to draw from what these gentlemen said. First, Marco, I think AI and how that supports some of these tools that pharmacists use, I think that's going to be a big disruptor. At some of these Pharmacy Edge conferences, we've had the good fortune to talk to some vendors that are creating some fantastic programs to help a pharmacist do their job, but not only do their job better, but faster, which, I've had the good fortune of looking at pharmacy over 30 years, and it is only got better for owners from a remuneration perspective, and I've seen a lot of millionaires be formed through pharmacy ownership.
Right.
So that's the frame of what I'm going to say is I'm an optimist, and I've seen independent pharmacy thrive. I've seen independent pharmacy owners get wealthy. Mm-hmm. I think that trend is going to continue. There's a lot of things that pharmacy owners are going to have to do. They're going to have to create efficiencies within their business. They're going to have to work, I hate the term, work smarter, not harder, but those tools, the AI tools, the clinical tools, automation, like you can improve the efficiency of your business immensely. The key there, of course, I'm going to go down a rabbit hole, I always do, is to adjust your wages when you get automation. Right. Maybe not fire somebody, but through attrition, figure out where you need to be. How many scripts per labor hour can you do with automation? Mm-hmm. The other thing is just these antiquated dispensaries that were created in that model in the 70s. It doesn't work anymore. I think pharmacy owners need to look at how many steps they're doing to do their tasks, because it's just evolved over time. It's like, well, that's over there. It was over there because it's been there for 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why not move it over here? Reduce the steps that you're making, and you can reduce your wages, increase your profitability. I think that's pretty much what I wanted to say.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to get a little introspective. Obviously, we have a diverse range of backgrounds here, all connected to pharmacy in some aspects. But we'll end with each of you maybe shedding some advice for your younger self. And if you could advise yourself, go back maybe 5, 10, 20, 30 years, however long, a piece of advice. We'll go in reverse order this time. Maybe Max, will start with you. Advice to your younger self?
Well, that's funny because I read that 2069 is closer than 1969, and I was born in 1969, so that's pretty scary for me.
You're over 50 is what you're saying.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell by your beard.
If I were able to, get in my DeLorean and go back, I would probably say to my younger self, learn how to delegate, learn how to create a life-work balance, and avoid, and by doing that, you can avoid burnout. And it's not just pharmacists suffering burnout. It's just about everybody working within the pharmacy industry. And it's due to complexity and regulation and changes. I think burnout can lead to some really bad decisions, just within your work, but also staying the path. I see so many pharmacy owners, I'm just done. I'm out. It's not the time to sell. You need to build your business. You need to fix some things. And so that's what I would advise myself, is just create that work-life balance. And that's a skill that needs to be learned.
Absolutely. Thank you, Matt. Mike?
Oh man, there's a lot of advice I give. There's an endless list of advice. I think what I've enjoyed discovering maybe over time is that there's opportunity for innovation in almost everything you do, and every job you might have, and every spot you might be. You know, you're talking about dispensaries exist because that's the way dispensaries existed, and I think one of the things that I've learned is that just because somebody did it a certain way before you doesn't mean that sort of incumbent idea is the one that needs to continue. And so I think I would spend more time just ensuring that things that happen just because they happen aren't always the most efficient or best way to do things, and to sort of have that, I want to say critical eye, but creative eye on everything that you're touching and doing.
Absolutely, well said. Matt, advice to your younger self?
But wait, he's already younger.
That's not fair.
This is not fair.
Well, yeah, aside from telling myself to buy an Amazon stock or Nvidia,
Of course.
Bitcoin maybe.
Of course.
But no, to be honest, it's kind of, as Max said, to be honest, it's not that far ago, but I guess it's get as much experience as you can under your belt, right? Everything will come to you, like you'll be able to use it one day or another. Learn as much as you can, and you'll learn as much as you can as you go. So
Absolutely.
That's great advice.
Marco?
Well, you guys have said it best, I think, because I like where you were going. I think look after yourself a little bit. I think that certainly would have applied to my life if I go back. But, you know, I think early on in my, you know, even just my business career, I think I wish I was more curious about things that I maybe didn't ask questions about. I didn't ask the right people the questions at the time I needed. And I think I could have gathered a lot more information quicker, probably been a lot smarter along the way, and probably improved just whether it's efficiencies or my own personal life. I probably could have done a lot more that way. So I say to younger people, look after yourself, treat yourself well, treat your family well, but also, you know, use your mind to ask those questions that you want to know, and reach out to those people that have got a little more gray in their beard. Some of us in this room have a little more gray in our beard. Ask the questions to the people with the gray in their beard, okay, because they usually have got something to teach you.
Awesome. Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap up. I want to extend a thank you to all the panelists today: Mike McGillivray, Max Beairsto, Marco Casagrande, and Matt Zubi. And of course, thank you for tuning in to this live panel discussion from Pharmacy Edge. Be sure to subscribe and follow us for more exciting events like these. I'm Matt Hodgson, signing off from Pharmacy Edge.